It took multiple checkpoints, identity checks, and a long walk through the blacked-out corridors of the presidential compound to meet Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Iryna Vereshchuk. In an Australian exclusive, ABC's Four Corners interviewed Ms Vereshchuk inside President Volodymyr Zelensky's heavily fortified compound in Kyiv. "We had been in the besieged city for 4 days, with Russian army attacks intensifying in surrounding suburbs, when we got the call to meet Ms Vereshchuk." Ukrainian military members stand guard at Independence Square in Kyiv. In the deserted historic center of Kyiv, soldiers manned defensive positions in the streets around the compound. Others were sawing off tree branches that could offer cover for snipers. An armored personnel carrier stood sentinel outside the president's office. Shots cracked suddenly in the still air. Soldiers ran shouting down one of the cobbled streets. Everyone in Kyiv is jumpy, with reports that Russian saboteurs are in the city. All the windows at the compound were sandbagged, with gaps for guns to poke through. In darkness, a soldier led the Four Corners team through long corridors, the only light inside coming from his head torch. Voices urged us to move quickly. Our sense sharpened of the threat Zelensky and his ministers face by remaining here. We turned finally into a well-lit room, the green back wall instantly recognizable as the place where the president has delivered some of his most powerful speeches. Sarah Ferguson speaks to Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Iryna Vereshchuk, inside a heavily fortified compound in Kyiv. Moments later, Ms Vereshchuk walked in, talking urgently on her phone. Hanging up, she told us she was responding to problems at the Russian-occupied Chernobyl nuclear plant around 100 kilometers north of Kyiv. While Ms Zelensky has been commanding international headlines and praise, less is known about the Deputy Prime Minister. As some MPs within the Ukrainian government are taking up arms for the first time after Russia's invasion of the country, Ms Vereshchuk had served as an officer in the Ukrainian army for 5 years. The 42-year-old has also practiced karate, hand-to-hand combat, and Thai boxing. She displays the same defiance that Mr. Zelensky has come to embody. "They will not succeed," she said. "Kyiv will not be taken by the Russians. Otherwise, we will all die here, together with the Russians." Deputy Prime Minister Iryna Vereshchuk has been actively involved with the military, visiting the Luhansk region in late 2021. Part of Ms Vereshchuk's wartime role is to organize the evacuation of civilians from towns under Russian armament. On the day we met, she was trying to get civilians out of the suburbs around Kyiv, Irpin, Hostomel and Bucha. The Russians had been targeting them as they tried to escape. "Russians are committing war crimes everywhere," she told Four Corners. "Every day and every hour, war crimes are committed against humanity, against civilians, according to all international conventions, law and principles." Residents of Irpin fleeing, caught up on the front line near Kyiv. Mr. Zelensky and his ministers have been lobbying the West to create a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Without it, Ms Vereshchuk said, Ukraine would struggle to defeat the invading Russians. "It's going to be very hard for us to defeat them," she said. "The Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian spirit prevail, and we are highly motivated. We are on our own land. We are defending our families, but Putin's number of jets, and other weapons significantly outnumber ours." A deal proposed by the Polish government to deliver MiG-29 fighter jets from the US military base in Germany was rejected by the US government. "I don't understand why we cannot do it as quickly as is necessary. We are suffering in the sky. We are really losing in the sky," Ms Vereshchuk said. A volunteer medic preparing ambulances for the evacuation of Irpin. She argues that Russia's attack on Ukraine threatens the rest of the world too. "I understand that you may not care about the of my child or my friend, but you should care about your family and your safety. Because it is an issue of our global security," she said. Leaders responsible for global security have to decide if they are prepared to have a person in the world who, because of his morbid ideas of what the world should look like, makes decisions that endanger the whole world and the existence of humanity. An injured elderly woman in Irpin is carried towards an ambulance. Russian President Vladimir Putin, she said, wanted absolute total elimination of Ukraine. Putin is punishing us for trying to become free, democratic, European, she said, to become what we have always had the right to be, a people with their own opinions, freedom of speech, freedom of choice. We choose our own government. We cannot be told where we should go and what organization we can join. This is what we are paying such a huge price for now. An elderly resident of Irpin being loaded into an ambulance. Watch the full investigation on ABC iView or live stream on the Four Corners Facebook page. Mr. Zelensky last week acknowledged that Ukraine would not become a NATO member, a significant concession, given one of Mr. Putin's key demands before the invasion was that its membership of NATO be ruled out indefinitely. Mr. Putin's invasion has created divisions among NATO countries. Poland is working hard to strengthen the resolve of its partners. It is telling that Bartosz Sieciaki, Poland's ambassador to Ukraine, is the only European ambassador still in the country. Poland's ambassador to Ukraine, Bartosz Sieciaki, is remaining in Kyiv. During Mr. Sicieki's interview with Four Corners at the Polish embassy, the air raid signal sounded. "S are coming. We move to the shelter, come. And do not film," he said. We hurried through the deserted corridors of the embassy. The bunker was a basement storeroom, with stacked gilt chairs and a pool table hidden beneath a large cloth. With old-world European manners, Mr. Sieciaki brushed dust from the chairs and made coffee for us in an espresso machine balanced on the pool table. After 45 minutes, we went back upstairs to one of the embassy's reception rooms. It was empty of decoration. The flags and national symbol of Poland, the eagle, had been shipped back to Warsaw at the start of the war to prevent them falling into the invaders' hands. A soldier on the outskirts of the Odessa region prepares to defend the Black Sea coast. Mr. Sieciaki is proud to have remained in Kyiv, despite the obvious danger. We will not leave the Ukrainians. And for me, it's a source of pride to stand, arm to arm, with the bravest nation in the world, he said. He said it would take further genocide of Ukrainian civilians to change NATO's position on the implementation of a no-fly zone. I don't think there may be anything more extreme than what happened to Kharkiv, Irpin and Bucha, he said, but there are still many cities left untouched. Unlike some of its NATO partners, Poland is defiant in the face of Mr. Putin's threats. I think we don't care anymore. Because this is our security, Mr. Sieciaki said. If Ukraine falls, we will be in big trouble. I believe the implementation of the Russian plan to create a grey zone in Central Europe would start, and it would be implemented with the use of force, or a blackmail of force, he said. A little boy watches as his train leaves Kyiv station. And, he said, for Poland that would mean a second-class NATO membership. Whatever happens, he said, Mr. Putin's invasion of Ukraine would force a new order on Europe. I believe that we'll now make further steps within NATO, within the United Nations to adjust, he said. Residents of Kyiv are fleeing their homes and evacuating on trains to an uncertain future. And I believe those systems, the United Nations systems, will have to change. NATO, as well, OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and others. I think they would be completely different after whatever happens. He described the invasion of Ukraine as the biggest crisis Europe had faced since World War II, threatening danger well beyond the borders of Ukraine. Very much dangerous. I think the inner circle of President Putin should take care that the red button is nowhere close to President Putin's fingers, he said, ominously. While regime change in Kyiv appeared to be one of the early objectives of the Russian invasion, at the southern end of the country, Ukrainians say Russian forces are seeking to cut off the country's access to the Black Sea and, possibly, capture the famous port city of Odessa. The city's mayor, Gennady Trukhanov, told Four Corners he believed Russia had two possible objectives. either to occupy the entire country and install a puppet government and president, or to divide the